The third reason, and one of the things I find most interesting, is that radical Islam is at an ideological turning point. Al-Qaida has really taken the radical Islamists into an ideological dead end. Now, what's the evidence of this? The best evidence is this new broadside by Syed Imam al-Sharif, also known as Dr. Fadl. Who is this guy? He was the emir of the organization Al-Jihad in Egypt that was really led by Ayman al-Zawahiri. It was a very bloody organization that waged open warfare on the Egyptian state in the 1990s. He wrote what Dr. Fadl's primary job in that organization, and then later in Al-Qaeda, was to write the books that form the ideological foundation of Al-Qaeda's philosophy. The first of these, The Essential Guide for Preparation, came out in 1988. And in there, Dr. Fadl points out that jihad is the natural state of Islam, and that Muslims must always be in conflict with non-believers. His second book, The Compendium of the Pursuit of Divine Knowledge, he says, salvation is only available to a perfect Muslim. And that rulers of the Arab countries are all infidels and must be killed. And not only them, anyone who follows them, anyone who works in the government, who works in the courts, in the police, anyone who votes in an election, all of these people are infidels. This is the phenomenon of takfir. That is the expulsion of one Muslim by another from the faith. And Dr. Fadl is its primary philosopher. These books were given to Al-Qaeda recruits, and they were used to indoctrinate the youth. Now, right after 9/11, Dr. Fadl was captured in Yemen, and he was taken to Egypt, put in a prison. And recently, in November of last year, he began publishing a refutation of this in a series of articles in Al-Masri Al-Yom, an Egyptian daily. His work now is called Rationalizing Jihad in Egypt and the World. And here, he has a completely different take on the role of jihad in the life of the Muslim. He begins by saying that nothing invokes the anger of God like the unwarranted spilling of blood and wrecking of property. He's against kidnapping and theft to finance jihad. He says it's forbidden to kill civilians. He says it's taboo to engage in indiscriminate bombing and killing on the basis of nationality. And he says jihad is not required if the enemy is twice as powerful. What good is it if you destroy one of your country's buildings and he destroys one of your countries, he asks. What good is it if you kill one of his people and he kills 1,000 of yours? That, in short, is my evaluation of 9/11. It's a broad attack on Al-Qaeda's philosophical and practical basis. We know that, yes, okay, it came from an Egyptian prison. How, notorious for torture. And yet, Zawahiri took it seriously enough that he wrote an entire book in response. Those of you who may have seen Zawahiri's Q&A session on the internet, very defensive performance, I thought. Many of the questions were directly tied to Dr. Fadl's criticisms of Al-Qaeda. Now, there's a debate going on inside radical Islam. It's unclear who will win the debate, Zawahiri or Dr. Fadl. But the mere fact that there's a debate is itself very important. Because let's say you're a young man who is considering becoming a martyr. What you need is certainty. You need to know that you're going to paradise, that your sacrifice is going to count for something. The mere fact that there's a debate about this right now creates an element of uncertainty that's very threatening to the future of Al-Qaeda. Moreover, this attack takes place in the context of a larger reconsideration of the use of violence inside radical Islam. The best example, I think, is Gamma Islamiyah, another Egyptian organization that was waged war on the Egyptian state in the 1990s, killing more than 1,000 Egyptians and dozens of foreign tourists. The leaders of this organization began to realize that they had accomplished nothing. They never overthrew the Egyptian state. They only alienated the Egyptian people. And they declared that they were opposed to violence. And now Gamma Islamiyah is essentially collapsed. It's a dead organization. That's what Zawahiri and bin Laden feared. The final point I'll make to you about Al-Qaida is that it offers nothing to the young men who join it. It has no vision of the future. If you had Osama bin Laden up here to speak to you this morning in breakfast, rather than Lawrence Wright, and you were able to ask him, all right, Mr. bin Laden, suppose you did take over Egypt or Saudi Arabia, what are you going to do with it? What is Al-Qaeda's plan for the future? What is like for instance, he's criticized America several times for not signing the Kyoto Protocol. Well, what's Al-Qaeda's environmental policy? What's your plan for health, education, welfare? By the way, Mr. bin Laden, what's your economic policy? Are you a Marxist, a Keynesian? I don't think you've ever said anything about this. It's not a political movement. He's never thought about these things. It has no vision for the future. It only offers one thing to the young men who join it, and that is death. I remember I was in Peshawar, Pakistan, which is where Al-Qaeda was born in August of 1988. And I spoke to Rahimullah Yousafzai, a distinguished Pakistani reporter who covered the jihad against the Soviets. And he remembers hearing about these Arabs, but he'd never really run into them before on the battlefield until one day he stumbled upon an encampment. And they were camped outside in white tents on an open field. And he said to them, what are you thinking? The Soviet Air Force can easily see you. You'll be wiped out. And one of the Arabs said, but we came to die. That's the seed that became Al-Qaeda. If it's fueled by the despair that runs through the lives of so many of these young Muslims, whose lives seem to have no direction or purpose. Al-Qaeda offers them a meaningful death. All they have to do is die. Now, I think I've gone over my time. I'm going to turn it over to the panel. Thank you very much.